I've been involved in different industries. So when we talk about TNA, one of the things we need to recognize is the kind of industry you're from does influence how you do TNA. And therefore, I've gone from manufacturing to entrepreneurship to charity, fast mover consumer goods. I've done quite a number of that. So my name is Isaac Peter. I became a professional trainer in 2009 because I wanted to be able to see how am I with people. So I was in Singapore since 2000. I came back in 2016. I started a company called People Performance, and I operate both in Singapore and Malaysia. TNA is a centerpiece that we actually use and work with our clients, which is why it's something that I'm very passionate about. And when we talk about training needs assessment, I look at it from a very technical perspective of how do we look at it, how do we break it down? And I'll go with you with that. Today's session, I'm going to cover 3 areas which I believe is going to help us have a right perspective, as well as get us to realize the importance of TNA. And then at the end of the session, I will show you a sample of the TNA form. And hopefully by then you'll understand what are the areas that you need to be focusing more on. First one, we're going to talk about the role of training needs assessment in developing organizations. That means in an organization, where does the training needs assessment sits, right? So that's the first part. Then I'm going to go into performing a training needs assessment. And this is what we call the DCA approach. So that's the terminology I use. We call it the DCA approach. And session 2 is going to talk about how do you perform it? What do you need in order to perform that? And finally, I'm going to share with you some of the solutions that we have for our clients and to see if this is something that you're interested in. So that will be the last part. Now, my sharing is going to be based on my experience and how I've done TNA and how I worked it with my clients in terms of doing TNA. Now, once again, everybody has their own way of doing. While the details can be different, the overall framework should be about the same. Let's start by first, and this is going to be a bit more reflective. What is the purpose of a TNA? It sounds like an obvious question, but if you can indicate in that text box to you, what is the purpose of a TNA? What would your response be? Can you just put it in the chat box? All right, for employee development, thank Najwa. Okay, can talk about identifying gap, area for improvement, great. Effective allocation of resources to build, good. So you are more on the context part, identify performance gap, great. Performance gap. Understand training needs and area for improvement, great. So on general, we have that, right? In terms of, at the big picture, we talk in terms of it is a method of determining, and here's the keyword. You want to see whether is there a training needs. Now, this is important because sometimes when an executive does a training needs analysis, actually what they're saying is, I need to know what workshop to put in the calendar. So that's what they're saying. We need to get it clear before you can even start plugging in what training to do for who and all, and this one needs to do. Now, let me give you an illustration, right? So if you think about it, so we talk about bridging the gap. So question is, what is the gap? So the gap is firstly the desire, and look at this word, the desired skill and behaviors to achieve organization's goal. Now, when we talk about organization goal, it can be strategy, it can be profit, it can be anything, but it is what the organization wants. So that is what the skills we are looking for. And currently is the actual skills. I mean, the way we are doing. So for example, if you can use computer, but you don't know how to do coding, then actual is don't know how to do coding, but desire is can code, right? So that's an example. Now, a training needs assessment is to fulfill this gap. And once you have this, then only you do calendar. The reason I'm highlighting this is whenever people ask me, Isaac, do you have a template? What generally happens is they are looking for a checklist of, what workshops can I go, or what workshop could my people go, right? And when that happens, basically what you are looking at is a menu, a training menu for people to fill up. Now, if you do that, how would you identify the desired, the gaps? That's one. Secondly, current practice, and correct me if I'm wrong, so please indicate the box if this is your current practice of TNA, is you will go a form, you have the template, you will pass it to the HOD or to the line managers, and you ask them to fill up what training does your staff need. Now, let me ask you, when a manager does that, is he achieving the desired skill for the organization or the desired skill for himself? So that's something for us to think about. When you get a line manager or HOD answers a TNA form and indicates the skill that he believes the staff needs, often it is based on what he thinks, right? And the question here is, how aligned is he with the organization? So as practitioners, we really need to be clear it is about organizational goals, not individual goals, right? So that's very key when we do this particular training. So question is, do you know what is your organizational goal, right? Do you know what's your organization strategy? What are your organization wants, right? So one of the things that when I work with L&D personnel, it is important for them to have some idea of what is going on business front. I have spoken to HR managers when I asked as simple as, what was your revenue like last year? They don't even know what's the revenue. Now, if you are a HRBP or if you are L&D, it is always good to know how your company is performing. Why? So we did training needs assessment. But so before we can even talk about training needs assessment, we are going to need to understand the role of training. Most of the time when we talk about training, the common answers is either we want to provide skills to the staff for performance, or we want to put the staff because it's good. Now, if you look at this statement, the equate employees, the keyword here is right skill. Question is, what is the right skill? Because what is right to me may not be right to you. What is right to you may not be right to someone. So what is the right skill? Now, it goes on to say, to achieve the desired results that contributes, which means it's right if it contributes towards the business strategy and goal, which is why you do need to take note. Later, I will share with you at a practical level. For some of you, the challenge is if you are reporting to manager and your manager is not aware of this, they may feel that you're asking too many things. So you want to just be mindful of that. But over here, when we say about the role of training is to provide the right skills to achieve the desired results for business strategy and goal. So what are the things that you need to understand? Things like organizational strategy, organizational direction, where are they going, what kind of technology that company is planning to have, what type of people you want to have. And these are the things that you need to understand. You don't need to create it, you don't need to design it, you don't need to contribute to it, but you need to understand it. And I use traveling as a simple analogy. So imagine you and your family want to travel. Question direction, where do you want to travel? If you're saying Japan versus saying you want to go Germany, it's two different directions. And therefore, in two different directions, the mode of transport could be different. And therefore, the question, so direction is where are you heading? So from a company, what is your direction? So that's one. Whether are you just going to be a local home player? Are you going to be a global player? What level are you wanting to play? So that is the business strategy. So for example, interestingly, you talk about direction. Why Grab moved from Malaysia to Singapore? So for some of you, you know the story. Grab was actually a Malaysian company, but they went over to Singapore. Why? Because besides funding, it's also in terms of how they branch into the market. So that's the direction. Now, so in this end, whether you're going Germany or Japan, strategy, how do you want to go there? So for example, do you want to take a transit flight? Are you going to a direct flight? Or do you want to have a combination of flight versus cruise? So that's strategy. And this is something that you need to understand, because as you know this, then you'll know, okay, how do I prioritize the way I want to deliver the skills that my people need? So that's strategy. Technology. So technology in this context is what are the kind of equipment I need. So if I'm going to go to Germany, let's say, is it winter? If it's winter, what do I need to bring? Winter clothes. If I need to go to Japan, is it what's the season? What's the situation? What kind of plug point head do I need to bring? So that's in terms of tour, in terms of a holiday. But if you are an L&D person, then the technology will be in terms of what are the kind of equipment that we have, what are the kind of new sophistication that organization want to bring. Do my people know how to use it, or don't they? So for example, with the whole COVID situation, the ability to run virtual workshops is a skill that all managers need to have. Question is, how many of us can say to some degree of certainty, 50% of our managers know how to use it, 20% of our managers are performing at an excellent level when they run virtual meetings. So those are the things that we want to know. Now, people. So part of the strategy is a people strategy. Are we going to have full-time staff? Are we going to do a VSS? Are we going to downsize? Are we going to learn to work with gig employees versus are we going to work with contract staff? Now, different type of people coming to the organization requires different strategy, requires different training. So let me give you an example. When I was in Singapore, we did a project with Changi Airport, and it was a customer experience project. Now, in Changi Airport, there was a lot of vendors, right? So you have your Watsons, you have your Guardians. And we needed to do a customer experience for the entire Changi Airport. Question is, who pays for it? So part of their strategy was to actually get the vendors to co-pay for the training. So we run the training for Changi, but the vendors co-pay on the program. So Changi only pays 50%. Now, so that's what we mean by you need to understand the strategy itself. Once you understand the strategy, then right skill becomes clear. Whether is it to be able to increase awareness. So for example, things like, you do core values program or culture program, then it's about increasing awareness as level 1, right? That's one. For example, let's talk about IR 4.0. There's some new technology coming up. At least you straight away start by creating awareness first within the organization. So that's one thing that you can do. That will be right knowledge. Improve retention. If your organization, for example, says, Isaac, the cost of hiring is too high because it takes about 8 months for a person to finally settle in my company. And therefore, it makes more sense to retain people than to hire new people. And therefore, part of the improvement strategy will be people use training in terms of, creating a sense of satisfaction, getting them to do what they want. So for example, in some organization, they actually allow you to attend, say, baking workshop because it's something of a personal hobby of yours. Now, is it directly related to the job? No. But the company has a strategy of improving the retention. So in that situation, they will do that. Once again, it goes back to strategy. If that is part of your strategy, is do it. But if not strategy, then it becomes a waste of money. And the third one, which is improve skill, which means, remember the gap, the desired versus actual. So it's really about bridging the gap. So this is what we mean by the right skill. This is something that I would share often in the sense that coming back to Malaysia, and as I interact with a lot of L&Ds and HR people, as Malaysians, we have very big hearts. So we always look in terms of training as something good to do. It's good to benefit people. When people learn, they'll be happy. It's good for that. And I have nothing against that. Coming from a professional perspective, from an organization perspective, the priority skills are skills that contributes to these things which is in the strategy direction. So this is something very clear. So as an L&D practitioner, you need to be very clear how to prioritize the skills. And that can only happen if you are clear with your direction, strategy, technology, and people. Right? So hopefully this gives you a proper idea of it. If you come back to this whole diagram, you'll realize when you do a training needs assessment, you're actually looking what are the areas that you need to cover. And these are training related issue, right? It is training related. If it's not training related, then it's not part of your assessment. Right? So that's why we talk about the role of training in developing organizations. Moving on, if you look at this, right, the iceberg, if training needs assessment in a way, it's very much on the surface. Sometimes your manager will say, hey, can you do training needs assessment? And usually what happens is they are talking about the conduct a training needs assessment, and they are basically thinking in terms, okay, go collect data, get a form, go collect data, analyze, and then we come up with a training calendar. That is actually just one component of it. The bottom of the icebergs are your designing a training needs and addressing the training needs. So these two other parts, which is called the DCA, design, conduct, address, is what you need to holistically run an effective training needs assessment. Now, what do we cover under design and needs, training needs? For example, you need to understand your organization business. This I did share just now. That's the first part. The second part, you must be able to translate business needs into a desired competency. Now, this is the skill that you guys want to be able to take in terms of how do we translate that, right? So it's about breaking down the skill, the behaviors or the competencies. And then finally, determining the data collection method. For some people, data collection is just a survey form. In some of the projects I do, we have things like focus group discussions, one-on-one interview, or what we call expert interview. So there are numbers of methods that you can use, but you need to find one that works for you. That's one. Secondly, one that fits your budget and fits your timeline. All right? So that's one. Now, after that, when you want to talk about addressing training needs, clearly you must have a training TNA report. So that has to happen. And then you need to be able to present findings to stakeholder. And I'll explain to you why is it so important to manage stakeholder, especially for those of you, this is the first time you're doing. It is critical that you do it, that you manage the stakeholder from the beginning so that there's no pushback. And then finally, develop training calendar. If you do everything well, training calendar is the easiest part to do. So that's where we're coming from. Let's go in terms of understanding your organizational business needs. Some of the questions that you want to ask, not so much your HR manager or that one, but your senior leaders, or find some kind of document. And this information usually are created by your senior leadership team, the C-suites, the bosses, the top bosses. They usually will know this. What's your organization strategy? So I started my career in Panasonic, and it was interesting within the space. Panasonic, we were not bothered about being first to the market. We were very happy with following. So we will always wait for Sony to launch a product. Then we will observe Sony and say, and this is back in the early 2000s. Nowadays, we don't talk so much about Sony. We will look at how Sony's product perform. And then if the product booms, right, then we will just come and start producing those equipment and technology. So we are not about first mover. And that itself is a strategy. So strategy, are you a low cost, is your business about a low cost strategy, or is your business about personalized strategy? So what's your strategy? For example, of strategy, you want to increase your customer base. In the past, let's say in the past, you were going direct to consumer, right? So for example, let's talk about the food industry now in the COVID situation. In the past, consumer buys directly. So it's a B2C, right? As a business, I cook the product, customer come and collect. Now, the strategy has to change to a B2B. I have to go through another business. I have to go through Grab. I have to go through Foodpanda. Obviously, the way you engage Foodpanda or Grab is very different when you engage the end customer, right? And therefore, what is your organization strategy? Different strategy requires different ways and different development. So that's what we talk about strategy. One. Secondly, what new technology or system the organization plans to adopt? So once again, let's use the same example. If your food business now is going to engage Grab. So question, do you know how to use the Grab app from a vendor's perspective to key in? If you don't know, then that becomes training itself. You need to do an online payment system. That is a technology that your people need to learn. Now, in COVID situation, it was instantaneously, we just get hit. But in organization where you're planning 3-5 years, where you're looking in terms of CapEx, capital investment, of capital asset in terms of new technology, new machineries, then you want to start building up and say, okay, what are the machineries that we do? Who needs to operate this machine? Who else need to know? And then you can actually develop a plan. So knowing what is coming is important. One of the common ones is if you're upgrading to an SAP system, from a manual system to an SAP system, that's something that might happen. All right. And then what new activities does the organization plan to embark? So one of the common ones are things like culture change. Those are the things, or new technology, or even in terms of bringing in, let's say there's a merger. So for example, most of you are familiar with whole Cellcom and DG merger. Obviously, there are new activities. Obviously, their training calendar now will be very different. So these are the questions you might want to ask the leaders in your organization. So that is the understanding of organizational needs. The next one, after you understand the need, okay, so let's say we got new customers, we got new machines. Isaac, how do you translate? Just a quick check again. Are you all familiar with the word competency? Yes or no? One thing I noticed in conversation with people, there's a tendency to think that competency is skill. Skill is only one part of competency. There is another two parts, the knowledge and the attitude part. So let me give you an example to make this easy to understand. We say about translating business need into competency. Once you have the competency, you can break it down, and that's where you look into what training programs you want to run. So let me give you an example. Let's say the competency is prepare a report. So I need to have my executives to know how to prepare a report. Now, what skill do I need? Well, I need to know how to use Excel. I need to know how to use Word. So that is skill. I can use Excel, I can use Word, but it doesn't mean I can create a report. The knowledge part is knowing the relevant information, knowing who to get the information from. Now, these two combined with the attitude over here, do it in a timely manner, is what constitutes a competency. Now, if you can break it down this way, then your ability to identify training needs becomes a lot easier. Now, this definitely takes a lot of time process as well as take a lot of engagement, which is why I started off by saying when you do a training needs assessment, and I told you the challenge, if you do through their HOD, the problem is they may not know exactly what's the staff issue. When you get everyone to complete the TNA, you will be very clear what are their challenges, and you can actually ask these kind of questions. So you want to be able to drill it down to a competency level. So let me just share with you list of competencies. Now, this is what I do with my clients. We actually, because I'm a consultancy entity. So when we do, we break it, we keep it very simple. So this is a very generic competency. But what happens is we actually contextualize internally. So let me just share with you, and you can actually use this as a framework. All right, use this as a framework. So the first one is organizational competency. You must know what your competencies are about. Now, for organizational competencies is what do I need to know in order to maneuver in this company? And the keyword here is not about doing my job, it's how do I maneuver in this company, right? For example, what's the culture of the company? You think in terms of onboarding programs, you think in terms of core values workshop, you think in terms of systems training. If you have SAP, the guy needs to know how to use SAP. If you are using some online tools, the guy needs to know how to use the online tools. Because why? This is organizational wide, right? So for as simple as if you are using Microsoft Outlook calendar to do calendaring for the organization, then you need to be able to put this as one of the trainings that the staff needs to go through because it's organizational based. That's organizational competency. Now, leadership competency. Now, leadership competency doesn't just mean manager. It could also be for team leaders. But this particular competency focuses on how to lead others in the organization. Now, it could be how to lead others. It could be how to lead in the organization because besides leading people, you also need to know how to lead units and how to lead the business units and how to lead the business itself, right? So depending on which level you are. So that's leadership competency. Now, people competency will be how to interact. So things like working with different personalities, things like soft skills training comes under people interact, as well as sometimes we also include things like personal competencies, like for example, being clear about your SMART goal setting. So you can actually do that, or personal development. So you can do that under people competency. Finally, is technical competency, how to perform the given task, which is technical ability. So for example, if you're in finance, you need to be able to have the finance capability, the finance knowledge, the ability to use the finance skill. If you are in manufacturing, you must be able to do the different manufacturing tasks. If you are in procurement, you need to do so. That is technical competencies. And if you notice, most of the time, technical competencies are usually people who join, either your juniors or your operators or your new executives, where they are very technically, they need to be able to grasp this, right? So these are the four that we generally use as an overall framework. You can use this and then you can tailor make the internal. So based on this, we will map it out against the business strategy. So that's how competency is. Okay, so this is the part where we talk about it. Then once you do this, obviously you want to be able to decide the data collection method. So the most common one, the easiest, is survey. But the survey has a limitation. And we are not covering it tonight, but I would encourage you in terms of, I will see if I can get some information for you guys, in terms of there are pros and cons of using survey. When you do a survey, you cannot have like 100 questions. People will switch off. You want to do a survey like maybe 10, 15 questions kind of thing. You want to ask broad level questions. And then you want to use things like focus group to have more conversation. So let's say you are a huge organization, you are manufacturing and you have operators. Obviously, all operators need to perform the same job. So you can actually find out what's their issue, then you have a focus group to go more details. So that's how you can use data gathering. You can also do one-on-one, especially for when you're doing with HODs. Now, the higher you go, you realize people are more sensitive about people knowing their faults. So the higher I go when I'm working with C-suites or HODs, the tendency is to use one-on-one interviews because they do not want other people to know their weaknesses. But with the ground level people, they are more okay with it. So that's the method in terms of data collection. So you're talking your organization, right? You want to have the competency first, which means when you are getting information from them, speak in their language or get a translator to find out from them. That's one. Secondly, when we talk about assessment center, which means in your factory or in your company, you actually get them to perform the task that they want to do. You observe how they do it. Based on your observation, you can actually see where are the areas they lack. Is it they are not following the instruction cards, or are they taking the wrong item? So you want to use that. You can do two ways. You can either watch them, which can be sometimes nerve-wracking, or you can use CCTV to observe. So that's how we do it. Use CCTV is another way to look at it. Objective of data collection stage is to ascertain the current competency. it is to identify currently what level are they. So for example, let's say influencing skill, right? Let's say influencing skill at the desired level for the sales team or for the marketing is influencing skill has to be high, say a 5 point. Currently, where are they at? Are they at a 2, 3, 4? What level are they? So when you do a data collection, you do need to be able to identify this, right? Now, which is why when it's a skill by itself to craft your questions and to craft your assessment template, because I would always suggest once you complete, get somebody to review, because if you write your own question, you would assume that's the right question. So part of reducing the bias in creating your assessment is have a team of people who comes with different perspective. Now, one of the things I would recommend is after you craft your template, your survey form, have a sit down with the managers, with the business unit managers, and let them look at it and let them ask questions. Now, based on the question, you will actually drill down your question to a lot more specific, right? So it is used to establish the current state. Now, once you know current level, then you know that the gap, how big the gap. Is it something I need to close immediately, or is it something I have end of the year to complete? So that goes into priority setting. After doing the assessment, you want to talk about conduct now. Get the buy-in from stakeholder is critical if this is your first time doing it. Why do I say that? Firstly, we need to recognize people in general are territorial. So imagine you are doing training, and let's say you're from HR and you go to manufacturing, right? And you say you want to do a survey to help. Now, to the manufacturing manager, you are coming to his territory. So once again, if you are coming to his territory, you need to get permission. You need to tell him, why are you doing that? On your end, you know you are doing something good. But for me, I have no idea what you're doing. And I may even perceive what you are doing may get me in trouble is one, or may expose certain things that I don't want you to see. If you don't engage them, you will get a pushback later on when you start administering or when you start proposing them training. You get pushback because you know why? They feel that you are infringing into their turf. So when we talk about engaging stakeholders from beginning, for example, after you have created your form, you want to have a meeting where you call all the HODs and explain to them what you're doing and this is what you're planning to do, right? And then get them to ask you questions. Now, the more you interact with them, the commitment to the process increases. This is the difference. Let's say you completed your TNA form and then you just send out an email to everybody, right? Or please complete the form. Now, you might actually get a situation manager will say, what is this form about? Now, by that time, it's a bit too late because the manager may have felt disrespected. And this is a lot more in the Malaysian context. In the Malaysian context, power distance is high, which means if you're going to do something and I'm a higher rank, you better get my permission first. Do not go directly. So you will get pushback if you don't engage them from the start. From the start means at the survey design, not when you are implementing the TNA. That's one. Commitment to the process, as I mentioned, when they do your survey, they ask questions, you are able to explain, you are able to influence. They will also tell you what they want. And this is where sometimes it allows you to actually share with them the organizational goal. I am very sure, and you will be surprised, there are business managers, there are HODs who don't really know the organization's goal. Now, this is where your opportunity to be able to educate them in a subtle way what the organization is looking for. And that's where the manager will say, oh yeah, in that sense, maybe this is what you look into. So work with them, be a partner to them, right? And that brings to the ensure relevance. Now, when you start engaging them before you launch your TNA, you actually make sure that your TNA is relevant because they are going to give you additional input. And some of the input may not be training related, but it's going to be good for you. That's one. Secondly, in the Malaysian culture, relationship building is extremely crucial. So even at this stage, you are actually getting them to come onto your side. So subsequently, when you launch the training, when you launch the TNA, and then when you get feedback and you work with them, they are actually more open to send their staff for the training. Some of the challenges that current L&D people face is they schedule the training, but managers don't send the staff. I'm not sure how many of you have faced that before, right? You already scheduled the training, they don't want to send the staff. And then it comes to a point where you feel you need to back them to send staff. Now, that itself shows that the department do not see relevance to what you're doing. If they see relevance, in fact, they will come to you and ask, hey, my guys need to do this, can or not? So that is where you want to reach, right? And now, once you do that, then basically it's a matter of putting things in the calendar, right? And this is the easy part, because once you identify the skill, you're able to push it into the calendar. And usually for calendar, you just want to take note things like your business peak period and the holiday seasons. You do not want to be scheduling for training on a holiday. People are not going to turn up. People are going to resent you for it. And peak period. Now, peak period is to determine your success, because as a L&D department, if you're going to run training, your success is depend on how many people come for training. That means number of training workshops. If you put your training during peak period, then it's going to jeopardize your success itself. So it's important to open up calendar, look, and once again, it has happened to some of my clients, because they are a Malaysian-wide company. They didn't realize that in some territory, the other time, I think earlier this year, I was running a program, Sabah was on leave. So the staff from Sabah didn't turn up, right? And to him, I cannot force him to turn up because he's on public holiday. So you want to look across Malaysia, look at the calendar and look at for timing where there's no holiday for any state. The next part, what I'm showing you is basically what a training department needs to do. I'm just going to share a bit about so in an L&D, and one of the things that we do is we run what we call a managed learning services. That means companies outsource training departments to us. And these are the 4 areas that we work on: assessment, administration, capability development, and strategy. So if you look at it, we call it LNA, right? Learning needs assessment. This is one of the key functions that we do for our clients. The other thing that we do is employee engagement survey and operational excellence or business excellence, administration, capabilities, and L&D. And this is something that we provide as business, which is why I'm very passionate about the TNA part, because this is what you need to do. One of the things that I do with clients, and for some of you, you might want to talk to me on it. After this, I'll walk you through a form and just kind of give you a better idea what are the challenges if you don't do this. You use a template, which is why I'm very cautious about just giving templates without explaining. So I'll be sending you guys this particular template. Once again, it is a template. I would suggest against you using this lock, stock, barrel. Now, you notice this particular form, it starts with a cover letter. Remember, you're going to send email, which is why I shared before you even launch this, you want to engage the HODs to make sure that there's no resistance. Once again, even and sometimes you get situation, you say, I want to do that, and they say, never mind, you go ahead and do. I would caution you from just launching it. I would encourage you to set a proper meeting for all the heads. Now, why is this? Because sometimes when they say, don't worry, you just go ahead and do it, they actually don't know how extensive it's going to impact his department. And I've seen many times where managers say, go ahead, do it. Then later on, when you come up with a TNA report and you say this is what needs to be, and they will say, no, actually, no, we don't have time. They have 101 reasons. And then some may even purposely push back because they feel that you have disrespected them by not getting them involved. So I would suggest, as a standard practice, set a meeting before you even start to be able to meet all of them and then show them what you're going to do, and then go along them with them, right? That way you can get it. So this is how a TNA form will look like, a standard cover letter. Then now demographics. So once again, this one I mentioned for entire organization, right? So if you look at this, you notice the divisions and the departments. So this allows me to know which department is filling up the form. And therefore, I will know what are their challenges. You look at line 2, do you have line management responsibility? So this focuses on, are they a people manager or are they a team leader? So once again, if you are a team leader, then the leadership competency comes into play. If you are not, then the leadership competency doesn't come into play. So that's how you look at this. Now, years of service gives a sense that in terms of, how long the firm in company. So once again, the usual assumption is if you've been in this company long enough, you understand how things operate. If you are new, then if you are certain thing you don't know, then we can send you for more training. So let's say you need to use a HR 2000 system, then you can send for that. Then current job role. So you notice in this, the whole laundry list of all the different job titles in the company. So it allows you to identify who is who. Now, this is very, very specific. So once again, it depends on how you create it, right? So this is demographic, and this helps you to know which department needs help in what particular skill. Here it goes to say list of types of training and development that you received at company last 2 years. So this also tells you, have they attended training? If they have them, obviously, if say 50, 60% people attended the training, then obviously this year it may not be a high priority unless the strategy requires that skill to be applied immediately, right? Now, this last part, please select up to 5 topics and facts most important. Now, this is to get them to tell you what they think. Remember, I asked you to understand your business organization, your organization strategy goal. If you don't have that, you will assume this is all the right training. If you know your business strategy goal, then you look here, 2 things can happen. Firstly, you can see whether are they doing what's needed by the business or are they doing things just based on what they think is needed, right? And that actually helps you to have a sense of what's going on the ground. Now, so let's come and look into a different one. So here, sample competencies. You see the word used here is competencies, right? Communication. So let's go on. Let's assume that the company has already done understand the business strategy, has done all the mapping, the desire and all, and then now this is competency. If you look at it, it says understanding written sentences, paragraphs in work-related document. So it gives you a sense that this applies more towards maybe a clerical staff. So obviously they will do this. Give full. So once again, it's about how competent are they? Are they really good at this, or are they have no info? They don't even know how to do it, or better, or not say better skill, or it's not even applicable. So let's say understanding. Okay, so this one is something that applies to everybody, lah. So I cannot use any. I will use different example. The next one, give full attention to what people are saying. So this will cover skills like active listening, how do you respond, right? So are people doing it? So once again, get the staff to indicate this. Now, it is important when you do this, you want the staff to feel comfortable. In some situation, and especially in today's context, I would suggest instead of doing the cover letter, you do a cover letter, but you also do a video of you sharing. And the key part that you want to share is, let me go back to the cover letter. The key part you want to share is this, right? The scores have no other purpose, right? Basically, it's also, you also want to mention that this is confidential because you want people to feel safe when they complete this. You do not want people to feel that, hey, if I put low, then it affects my bonus. You don't want people to feel that way. So you really need to be very clear. And doing a video introduction is very helpful in today's context, right? So go through. Now, the thing that I would suggest whenever you do a TNA form, always have a qualitative survey where you let them write exactly what they are feeling. This is important because this helps you to understand more. That's one. Secondly, if you notice the comment is very common across many employees, then it allows you to pull for a focus group to actually dig deeper in terms of what exactly is the issue. So this allows you to do that. So always have a qualitative part, a comment box for people to fill up. All right. Now, the rest are the same. What you notice here are all the competencies, all the different competencies. And once again, it's for you to label it. So I'm not going to go through everything because this is just a sample. So I'm just giving you an example. So you notice Excel, or these are the skill part, right? But a competency, when they do TNA, is to map the competency, and then based on that, you have skills. Now, this is what happens. Let's say we have competency like prepare a report, and then let's say another competency focuses on data collection or production line. Now, obviously, both skill requires Excel. So one of the things that L&D person needs to do is to use both to identify that particular skill and say, okay, we have 20 people that needs to go Excel. But out of 20, maybe 5 is doing report, the other 15 is focusing on data collection. So notice that's how you work, and that's how you break it down into training workshops. So when you talk about skills workshop, you focus on, say for example, Excel, because for example, Ken does with Excel. So it's about using Excel, but using Excel for what purpose? Is it for reporting? Is it for data collection? Is it for analysis? So those will be more the competency part.